Hello everyone, and welcome to the Commander's Forge. My name is Andy Bentley, and the Commander's Forge is an area for me to talk about magic, Commander, and anything else I feel like as I try to bring mental health into gaming. Now, today I just want to kind of talk about pre-release and how I did and stuff like that. And I'm going to lead off by saying the one pre-release that I typically play in nowadays is the first one, which is a two-headed giant at my shop, and I usually partner with my cousin. Now, getting into the actual nitty-gritty of the game, our pools were not spectacular. I wouldn't actively call them bad, but they were fairly mediocre. His promo was Ludwig, and mine was the Boros Rare Land. And we built as synergistic as we could between the two pools. He ended up playing a blue-black value deck, and I was playing red-white with a focus on vampires, but not entirely vampires. We ended up going 2-2, which wasn't bad, but we definitely pulled our wins out by the skin of our teeth, and when we lost in spectacular fashion. But the whole point of that pre-release was, get out of the house and just go have fun for a few hours. So, it doesn't really matter how we typically do, as long as, we're just having a good time. It's a lot of fun. But yeah, there's not a ton that I pulled that, I was looking for from the set. And there wasn't a ton that he pulled that either of us were looking for from the set. So it just it's just a way to blow off steam for 6 hours. Which, given the state of the world, was still greatly appreciated. That, and we love our LGS, even though for me it's, an hour and some minute drive. Yeah, that's basically all I have to say about pre-release. It was fun. We only do one now because, especially with the pandemic still going, we just try and be as safe as possible. So that means not going to every pre-release and stuff like that. Yeah. Good times. Hey, I just want to take a minute to tell you about my Patreon. I know times are hard for everybody, and I know it isn't easy to shuffle around bills and stuff. Believe me, I know that. But if you would like to help support the podcast and me, you can find the links to my Patreon in my link tree, which is always put into the description of either the video or the audio, wherever you're listening to it. It would really mean the world to me. Honestly, I'm just struggling to make ends meet most weeks. But that's it. That's all. If you want to help, the links will be where you can find them. And welcome back. Now, I thought in honor of the vampire set being released, we could talk about a vampire deck. So let's talk about Edgar Markov. Now, first off, Edgar Markov is an entirely overpriced card, but he is a 4/4 vampire knight. He costs 3, a red, a white, and a black. He has Eminence, which is probably the biggest problem people have with him, but whenever you cast another vampire spell If Edgar Markov is in the command zone or on the battlefield, you create a 1/1 black vampire creature token. He has first strike and haste, and whenever Edgar Markov attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on each vampire you control. Now, when I built the deck, and it has been built, torn apart, rebuilt, and then had things shuffled around in it a few times. But the goal was play as many low-cost vampires as possible. The deck that I've settled on now still does that. But there's maybe a few less 1-drops. But in that theme of low-drop vampires and low-drop things in general, we ended up with 18 1-drops, 12 2-drops, 17 3-drops. And then from there it goes 7 4-drops, 6 5-drops, 2 6-drops, and 1 7-drop. And the thing with like the 1 mana cost vampires is they're not that great alone. But when you're getting 2 vampires for 1 mana, it makes it a little better. So something new that I just put in was Voldaron Epicure. It's a single red mana for a 1/1 vampire. When it enters the battlefield, that deals 1 damage to each opponent, and you create a blood token. And blood tokens are the new tokens, and you can pay 1, tap it, and discard a card to sack the artifact and draw a card. Arguably not that great, but when you're paying 1 mana to do 3 damage, make a blood token, and then put 2 1/1s into play, this is pretty good. Things like Vicious Conquistador. It's a single black mana for a 1/2 vampire soldier. When Vicious Conquistador attacks, each opponent loses 1 life. Again, not terribly impactful in a game where you have 3 opponents with 40 life, but that 1 mana makes this thing that's will start pinging people and an additional 1/1. Or Vampire of the Dire Moon. Single black mana, 1/1 vampire with Death Touch and Lifelink. Arguably not bad. Maybe one of the better 1-drops, but just you get it and a 1/1. It just, the number of times I've played this deck where by turn 4 I have 8 vampires in play is more than 5. Things like Skymarch Aspirant. It's a single white for a 2/1 vampire soldier, but it has Ascend and it has flying as long as you control the city's blessing. Arguably one of the best 1-drops is Knight of the Even Legion. Single black 1/2 vampire knight. You can pay 2 and a black to give it +3/+3 and Death Touch till end of turn, and then at the beginning of your end step, if a player lost 4 or more life this turn, you put a +1/+1 counter on the knight. It's just cheap, efficient vampires. Danto Vanguard is 1 and a white for a 1/1 vampire soldier. As long as it's attacking, it gets +2/+0, and you can pay 4 life to give it indestructible till end of turn. Blood Artist and Cruel Celebrant are pingers. Blood Artist being 1 and a black for a 0/1, but when Blood Artist or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Cruel Celebrant is a white and a black for a 1/2 vampire that says whenever Cruel Celebrant or another vampire or planeswalker you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Gifted Aetherborn is black for a 2/3 Aetherborn vampire with Death Touch and Lifelink. It's almost a Nighthawk, but not quite. It just, there's enough synergies in the 1, 2, and 3 mana that make Edgar just insane. And then we have to talk about Lords. So things like Legion Lieutenant is a white and a black for a 2/2 vampire knight. Other vampires you control get +1/+1. Or Vampire Socialite, which is a black and a red for a 2/2 Vampire Noble with Menace, or Menace as we call it around here. And when Vampire Socialite enters the battlefield, if an opponent lost life this turn, you put a +1/+1 counter on each vampire you control. And as long as an opponent lost life this turn, each other vampire you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. This essentially gives your vampires Blood Rush 1. It's just, yeah. Stromkirk Captain is 1 a black and a red for a 2/2 vampire soldier with first strike. Other vampires you control get +1/+1 and have first strike. Even things like Rakish Air, 2 and a red for a 2/2 vampire, but whenever a vampire you control deals combat damage to a player, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. It's just, yeah, that's just it. And then when you get into the stuff that's more than 3 mana, you get things that you definitely want to hold on to. Things like Bloodline Keeper, which is 2 black for a 3/3 vampire with flying, but you can tap it to put a 2/2 black vampire creature token with flying onto the battlefield. And you can pay a black to transform the Bloodline Keeper. Activate this ability only if you control 5 or more vampires, and he flips into Lord of Lineage. He is a 5/5 vampire with flying, and other vampire creatures you control get +2/+2, and you can still tap it to put a 2/2 black vampire creature token onto the battlefield. Kalidas, Trader of Get, 2 black for a 3/4 vampire warrior. Lifelink. If a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, instead exile that card and put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. Then you can pay 2 and a black and sacrifice another vampire or zombie to put 2 +1/+1 counters on Kalidas, Trader of Get. Just, there's enough synergies in the deck that really bring it together. Sanctum Seeker, 2 black for a 3/4 vampire knight, but whenever a vampire you control attacks, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. That tracks per vampire. It's just, if you can't tell, I really enjoy this deck. Now, let's talk about some of our more expensive stuff, like Blood Tribute. 4 black, sorcery. It has a kicker to tap an untapped vampire you control. Target opponent loses half his or her life, rounded up. If Blood Tribute was kicked, you gain life equal to the life lost this way. Again, we're pretty much always going to have just a random vampire that isn't attacking to tap. And it's just, yeah, it just helps preserve your life total too. Patron of the Vein, 4 black for a 4/4 vampire shaman with flying. When Patron of the Vein enters the battlefield, destroy target creature an opponent controls. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, exile it and put a +1/+1 counter on each vampire you control. And then at 7, we added Ruinous Ultimatum. It is red, white, black. It's a sorcery that says destroy all non-land permanents your opponents control. But yeah, that's kind of the deck in a nutshell. And I guess that'll kind of bring this to a close. I really do need to link my Archidect into my link tree, and I think I'm going to work on that next, so that you can actually look at the decks that I talk about. But that said, it's been many days that Andy has been working overtime and not getting a lot of sleep, so he's going to try and take a nap after this. With that said, I will see you next time. Thanks for listening. The logo for the podcast was created by Nate and Erica Jacobs. And the music used was provided for use by Cody Mulpey and Ian Foss of The Crypt. You can find their music online by searching for The Crypt, and I must recommend them if you enjoy heavy music. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.